My queen, if you are here, it is because something within you can no longer bear to continue feeling that men do not value you as you deserve, because you have reached a point in your life where you no longer seek cheap attention, crumbs of affection, or mere tolerance of your presence. You seek to be chosen, respected, and protected as the extraordinary woman that you are. And I will tell you something that very few dare to admit. When a man truly feels that he could lose you, everything changes in the way he looks at you, treats you, and desires you. But the key, my love, is that silence alone is not enough. Silence by itself is not sufficient. Today I will show you the most powerful tool that a mature and conscious woman can use so that a man regrets losing you in the very same moment. And I am not speaking of childish games or cheap manipulation. I am speaking of a profound change within yourself, a change that you can never undo once you have embraced it, and that forever changes the way men see you. But before I reveal it, you must do 3 things for me. First, subscribe to this channel right now and activate notifications, because what we reveal here cannot be found just anywhere. This is knowledge that the wisest women have passed down in whispers from generation to generation, and that I now place in your hands so that you never again have to beg for love. Second, leave me a comment and tell me at what moment you realized that a man gave you less than you deserved. That moment of clarity is more important than you think. And third, share this video with that friend who is still waiting for him to change, to wake up, to finally recognize what he has in her. Because what we discussed today is the ultimate antidote to that useless waiting. I am Nilda Chiaravilio, and after more than 2 decades of working with women who gave everything in love without receiving the same in return, I have reached a realization that may be painful, but is the most liberating truth you will hear today. It is not silence that makes a man appreciate you, but wisely applied emotional distance. Silence is only a tool, but if it is not accompanied by an inner reordering and a clear return to your own value, it only leads to confusion within yourself. The first thing I will teach you today is this. For him to regret losing you, you must first make sure that you are not the one regretting having given yourself away half-heartedly. Let me tell you something that happened recently. I was at a dinner with a group of women, all over 45, each with her own story, but with one phrase echoing again and again. I don't understand why he changed toward me. One of them, Letitia, 51, told me, Nilda, after our last fight I remained silent. I didn't text him, I didn't call him. I thought it would open his eyes, but nothing happened. I looked at her and said, because silence has no power when he knows your heart is still waiting for him in the same place. Letitia frowned. What do you mean by that? I mean that as long as you press pause emotionally but keep your energy directed toward him, he feels no loss. He only feels that the game is suspended, and that he can resume it whenever he wants. True regret only arises in a man when he realizes that the woman who once did everything for him has shifted her center of gravity outside of his orbit. And that is not achieved through silence, but through a radical change in dynamics. Here comes the first lesson you must remember today. For him to feel your absence, you must learn to fill your presence with yourself. Only then, when your life no longer revolves around him, when your days are full of plans, people, goals, and joys that have nothing to do with his name, something within him begins to grow restless, not because you are unreachable, but because you are completely reached by yourself. Let me give you an example. Rosa, 49, had been seeing a man for 8 months who gradually made her secondary. More excuses, less time, less interest. When she came to me, she was desperate and wanted back what they once had. I showed her something very simple, and yet deadly effective. It was not about writing cooler messages or blocking him to force a reaction. It was about redirecting all the energy she had given him back into her own life. Rosa started going to yoga classes again, reconnected with old friends, traveled alone for a weekend. And within weeks he began seeking her out with a nervousness he hadn't shown in months. Why? Because he could no longer be sure he had a fixed place in her schedule or in her heart. And here comes the second lesson. Do not seek to create jealousy, seek to create respect. Most women who try to make a man regret do so out of wounded vanity, posting pictures so he sees them, showing themselves with other men just to get his attention, or disappearing for a few days and then coming back as if nothing had happened. That does not create respect, but mistrust. And worse, it confirms that all your actions still revolve around him. True strength lies in your actions being so consistent with your self-love that they make sense even if he never sees them. When you stop acting for him and start acting for yourself, he feels it in an almost instinctive way. And I warn you about something: not every man who regrets will deserve to return. But the goal here is not that he comes back, it is that if he does, he encounters a renewed woman, not the same one who once gave everything and settled for crumbs. This brings me to the third lesson you must recall every time you are tempted to wait for his reaction. Male regret is not triggered by words, but by the direct experience of your emotional absence. And I do not speak only of physical distance, but of that moment when he seeks in you the same availability, the same automatic devotion, and realizes it is no longer there. That something in you has changed places, and that even if your voice remains the same, your energy no longer kneels at his feet. And what I am telling you now can not only change your view of relationships, but forever the way men perceive you. Because there is an uncomfortable truth that no one dares to speak aloud. A man does not regret losing you when he sees you suffer. He regrets it when he sees you bloom, in a space to which he no longer has access. This blooming is not revenge, but emotional independence. It is the silent closing of a door, where the silence left behind on the other side weighs heavier than any scream. Let me tell you about Marcela, 54 years old. She had been married for more than 2 decades to a man who took her for granted. After the separation, she believed her strongest weapon was to prove to him that she could go on without him. But she did it out of resentment, carefully edited photos on social media, indirect messages, appearances in places she knew he would be. The result? Nothing. No call, no real sign of regret. When she came to me, I told her something that shook her. Marcela, he will not miss the woman who now only acts to provoke him. He will miss the woman who no longer needs to provoke him. Only then did her true transformation begin. She focused on everything she had always postponed: writing her book, traveling to Italy, learning photography. She did not block her ex, but she stopped sending signals. 3 months later, he reached out with the typical sentence, "You seem different, happier." It wasn't magic. It was that for the first time in years she was living a life that no longer needed his presence to be complete. And here comes the fourth lesson. If you want a man to feel your absence, then stop being his unconditional source of emotional comfort. Most women believe that he will already realize how valuable they are if they continue to stand by his side as a friend, advisor, or support. No, my dear, the only thing you achieve with that is that he enjoys the benefits of you without taking the responsibility to respect you. The real blow to his ego is that he realizes that you are no longer his automatic refuge, that your answers to his messages take time because you have other commitments, that his problems no longer find an immediate solution in you because your energy now belongs to yourself. Lucia, 47 years old, told me, "I can't be cold, Nilda. It's in my nature to care for him, to think of him." And I replied, "It's not coldness, it's prioritization. And if you don't prioritize yourself, he won't either." When Lucia understood that it was not about being harsh, but about managing her generosity like a valuable resource, the whole dynamic changed. He went from ignoring her calls to seeking her, from making excuses to planning meetings in advance, not because she was playing games, but because he could no longer be sure. The fifth lesson is crucial, and it may hurt a little. Stop announcing your worth. Start living it. Many women, when they distance themselves, feel the urge to justify it. I'm busy, I need time for myself, I'm not mad. But the problem is, with these explanations, you only open the door for him to negotiate, to try to pull you back into the old dynamic. A woman who has truly raised her standards does not explain them, she embodies them. When your absence is backed by a rich, coherent life, he does not need to hear your reasons. He sees them, he feels them, and he recognizes them as a new reality in which you are the center. And here comes the sixth lesson, one of the most powerful to make him: regret. Do not interrupt his experience of loss. That means when he begins to feel your absence, do not rescue him too soon from that emptiness. We women tend to give in as soon as he sends small signals, a message, an "I miss you," a spontaneous invitation. But if you immediately grant him the same access again without him having shown real changes, you destroy the entire effect of your absence. True regret needs time to solidify. He must face the discomfort of not having you anymore, and at the same time remember what you meant in his life. Let me illustrate this with Paula, 50 years old. After a painful breakup, her ex started sending her ambiguous messages. "I had to think of you. How are you?" Paula wanted to respond full of emotion, but understood that he was not showing real effort. So she remained polite, answered briefly, and continued her life. 1.5 months later, he came with a concrete proposal to resume the relationship, but with new agreements. The difference lay in the time he spent without her unconditional attention, which forced him to recognize her value. That brings us to the seventh lesson. Replace waiting with creating. If your energy remains stagnant, only hoping that he will react, you exhaust yourself. But if you invest it in something new, a project, a physical goal, a support network, your energy changes, your frequency rises. This new vibration is impossible to overlook, even for him. Men feel when you are no longer the same, and even if they don't say it, it creates in them a mixture of curiosity and urgency. Remember, my queen, your goal is not for him to feel bad, but for you to feel fulfilled. His regret is only an inevitable side effect of your transformation. And what I reveal to you in the next part is the exact trigger that accelerates this regret. A change so subtle that it needs no words, and yet so powerful that it forever defines how he sees you. This trigger consists of managing your emotional access as if it were a luxury that only the most valuable can afford. That does not mean that you become unreachable or cold. It means that your time, your attention, and your energy are no longer a self-service buffet. When a man feels that access to you requires intention, respect, and consistency, his perception changes radically. What was once taken for granted now becomes irreplaceable. Let me tell you about Teresa, 48 years old. After years in a relationship where she was always the first to call to clear up misunderstandings and always available, she decided to try what I suggested. He should take the active part. It wasn't about ignoring him, but about responding warmly only when he approached and never initiating contact herself. At first, he didn't notice the change, but after 2 weeks, he began to write to her more often, to invite her with more notice, even to call her, just to hear her voice. When I asked her how she felt, she said, "For the first time, I feel that he cares about me, instead of me always having to do everything for him." That, my dear, is what happens when your access is no longer automatic. He begins to cherish every moment because he knows it is not a right, but a privilege. And here follows the 8th lesson. Never interrupt your process just to ease his discomfort. When he begins to perceive your emotional absence, his first reaction is not necessarily romantic. Sometimes he tries to provoke you to drag you back into the old dynamic, with jokes, hints, little quarrels. Do not fall into this trap. Men know, even if they don't admit it, that it's easier to make you react through anger than through calm. If they succeed in upsetting you, they feel they still have power over you. True strength lies in staying in your center. I'll give you an example. Anna, 52 years old, was in the middle of this process of reclaiming her power when her ex sent her a provocative message. Surely you already have someone else. In the past, she would have reacted with outrage, explanations, or even hurt words. This time, she simply wrote, "Interesting that you think that," and turned back to her day. No argument, no emotional outlet, no door he could use to control the narrative. 3 days later, he sought her out, but with a completely different tone. Why? Because he didn't find the entry point he expected. The 9th lesson is one that almost no woman truly applies. Let him miss you without the constant interference of your presence. The most common mistake is to disappear for a few days and then come back as if nothing had happened, with the same messages and the same availability. That does not create real regret, it only briefly interrupts the cycle. The real change happens when contact naturally becomes less, because your life is now filled with other things, not because you want to. Punish him. When your absence is the result of your abundance, it has a completely different effect. It is not a tactic, it is your new reality. Sandra, 50 years old, experienced it in a perfect way. She was used to writing to him every evening to ask how he was doing. One day she decided, instead of sending the message, to go out for dinner with a friend. The dinner turned into a deep conversation, photos were taken, there was laughter, and when she came home, it was too late to write to him. The next day he said, "Last night I missed you." Not because she had consciously remained silent, but because she was truly unavailable. And it is precisely this difference, my queen, that creates the real effect. The 10th lesson is perhaps the most counterintuitive. Do not try to show him that you are still the same as before, only busier. Many women, even from a distance, continue to send small signals so that he knows they remain interested. A like on social media, a comment under his photo, a short message like, "Just so you know I'm fine." But this destroys the entire effect of your absence, because he interprets it like this: "She is still thinking about me, she is just playing." The absence that provokes regret is the one that makes no effort to be noticed. And this brings us to the 11th lesson, which you should tattoo into your soul. Silence without conviction smells of facade. You can stop writing to him, you can avoid seeing him, but if inside you are waiting every minute for his reaction, that energy is noticeable. Because even if you don't believe it, men feel whether a woman has truly let go or if she is just pretending. True detachment is not indifference, but peace. It is the certainty that your life goes on, with or without him. Finally, the 12th lesson in this part: never try to accelerate the process. Male regret is not instantaneous. It is cumulative. It grows day by day, every time he tries to reach the woman he once knew, and instead encounters another. It is like a drop that falls again and again on the same spot until the stone one day gives way. If you try to force this moment, you destroy it. If you let it flow, it comes on its own. And what I will tell you in the next part is the point of no return, the moment when he shifts from mere curiosity to real fear of having lost you forever. This point of no return does not happen when he sees you happy, not even when you seem more attractive to him than ever before. It happens at the moment he realizes he no longer has power over what you feel. A silent moment, invisible to others, but devastating to him. The moment he understands that your life has advanced so far that his return would no longer be a coming back, but only an interruption. Let me tell you about Claudia, 53 years old. After a grueling divorce, her ex tried several times to come back. At first, each of his messages was an earthquake for her. They stirred up her feelings, made her reflect. But over time, Claudia began to work on herself. Therapy, a trip alone, new friendships, and even a small business she had always dreamed of. When he finally came back with the worn-out phrase, "I have changed, I want to try again, she calmly replied. I thank you for saying that, but I am no longer at that point in my life. And she did not say it to hurt him, but because it was the truth. For the first time, he felt that there was nothing he could offer her to win her back. That, my dear, is the true point of no return. Here comes the 13th lesson. For him to reach this point, it is not enough to show him that you are busy. You must silently show him that you have rewritten your story without him. This does not happen through indirect hints or telling your new life so that he hears about it. It happens when your life speaks for itself. New circles, new experiences, new versions of yourself that he does not know and to which he will have no access. The man who once believed he could always return to your world realizes that this world no longer exists, and that is the sharpest regret he can feel. The 14th lesson changes the way he perceives you in the long run. Shift your position from available with conditions to unreachable through growth. What does this mean? It means that you do not meet him anymore out of anger or resentment, but because your growth has brought you to a level where you simply no longer share the same frequency. He may feel your warmth when you meet by chance, but he also realizes that in your daily life there is no longer room for him. And here is a detail that few understand: the difference between absence and replacement. Many women believe that he must regret it if they replace him with someone else. But the absence that hurts the most is not the one filled with another person, but the one filled with a new version of yourself, a version he never knew. When your wholeness does not depend on a new man in your life, his ego suffers a blow that is hardly repairable, because he realizes that what you lost with him you did not seek in someone else but built within yourself. Look at what happened with Estella, 49 years old. Her ex was convinced that she would come back immediately if he just snapped his fingers. At first her instinct was to go out with others to prove to him that she did not need him. But that only brought arguments, artificial jealousy, and even more drama. When she decided to fully focus on her own project, a cafe she opened with a friend, everything changed. When he came by one day to see how she was doing, he found a busy, smiling woman without a trace of resentment, with plans that did not need his approval. What most unsettled him was not that she was with someone else, but that she was complete without needing anyone. And so we come to the 15th lesson, my favorite. Do not make your growth a show for him. Make it your lifestyle. Because, my dear, the greatest regret a man can feel is not losing you to someone else, but losing you forever to your own path, to a life that no longer has tickets for those who did not appreciate you when they were still in it. And in the next part, I will take you even deeper, how to preserve this strength, even if he comes back with promises, changes, and declarations of regret that sound perfect, but could be nothing more than bait to pull you back into the old exhausting dynamic. Because when a man truly feels he is losing you, his instinct is not always to let you go in peace. Sometimes he comes back not because he is ready to give you what you deserve, but because his ego cannot bear that you close that door without asking his permission. And here, my love, many women stumble. They mistake his restlessness for true love. That is why the 16th lesson is, never interpret a dramatic gesture as proof of change. Men who have truly changed their way of loving do not need big theatrical performances, because real change is not shown in intensity, but in consistency. Marina, 55 years old, experienced it firsthand. Her ex came back after 6 months of silence with flowers, tears, and promises of being a different man. This time she was tempted to believe him because his words sounded sincere. But instead of being overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment, she applied the strategy I had taught her. Observe for 90 days before making a decision. During those 3 months, he once again showed exactly the behaviors that had hurt her before. Last-minute cancellations, lack of genuine interest in her projects, and small jabs disguised as jokes. If she had given in to the first impulse, she would have fallen back into the same cycle. Thanks to her patience, she did not fall into the trap. And that brings us to the 17th lesson. Before you open the door, make sure he has proven that he can enter without dirtying the floor. Change shows itself in daily details, not in grand words. Ask yourself, has he respected my time? Has he maintained his level of attention without me chasing him? Has he shown genuine interest in my life and not just in my availability? If you cannot answer these questions with a clear yes, do not open the door. The 18th lesson is crucial to protect yourself. Define your new standards in writing before he comes back. Many women set their boundaries only when he reappears, and that is exactly where weakness begins. If you make clear in advance which behaviors you will no longer accept, you do not base your decision on your current emotions. For example, I do not accept constant excuses for cancelled plans. I do not tolerate long periods of silence without explanation. I do not take part in disrespectful arguments. These rules are non-negotiable. They form the foundation of your new life. An example I often tell in my seminars. Cecilia, 50 years old, wrote her list before her ex returned. When he showed up again, she listened to him, but made it clear that he had to meet 3 very concrete conditions to have a place in her life. He agreed, but after 2 weeks he broke one of those conditions. Without drama, without tears, she said, "We talked about this, you didn't keep it. There is nothing more to say." The result? He understood that he was no longer dealing with the same woman he had left. This clarity not only protected her peace, but even increased the respect he had for her, even if that meant going separate ways. Here follows the 19th lesson, which may seem harsh, but is your strongest armor. Never sacrifice your peace to save a relationship. If he comes back, it must only be because his presence increases your well-being, not because he becomes a new battle you must endure. Healthy relationships are not based on constant monitoring, but on natural cooperation. If you have to shrink yourself, dim your light, or lower your energy to make him fit into your life, then his return is not worth the price. Therefore, my love, the 20th lesson is, do not be afraid to let his regret become his lesson instead of his chance to return. Sometimes the best way for a man to understand what he has lost is to let him live with that loss, not as punishment, but to preserve the treasure that you have become. And now in this last part comes the 21st and final lesson. The one that not only closes this cycle, but places you on a level where no man can ever again consider you expendable, because you have learned to forever be your own priority. The 21st lesson, my love, is the essence of it all. Become the woman whose most important validation does not come from a man, but from her own fulfilled life. Because when you have reached this level, no man can ever again leave you in the conventional sense. He can only lose the privilege of walking the path with you. Here, many women make the mistake of believing that putting myself first means forgetting others or becoming hard. No, putting yourself first means that everything you allow into your life must align with your peace, your growth, and your purpose. It is not a shield against love. It is a filter against what is not love. And when he senses that this is your new natural state, something breaks in him because he realizes he cannot return to your life with old keys. My queen, now that you have heard all these lessons, know this. The true path is never a game nor a tactic, but an inner transformation that leads you to become a complete woman. Men will come and go, some will regret, others not. But what truly matters is that you never again lower your standards and never give away your heart without being aware of your own worth. Because in the moment your energy begins to speak instead of your words, everything changes, not only how he sees you, but above all how you see yourself. Your life becomes an example that love is not begging, but a choice, and that a woman's true power springs from her inner peace. Therefore, I wish that you carry what you have heard today as a reminder with you. You are not an option, You are a privilege, and when you internalize this deeply, you will no longer have to prove to anyone who you are, nor wait for someone to choose you. You will be the one who decides, with whom she shares her space, her time, and her soul. That is your greatest gift and your protection. And when he comes, he must come as a man ready to value you, not as someone who expects you to save him from his own regret. In the end, my love, your story lies in your hands. And what you have now learned is that the greatest victory is to become a woman who never turns her back on herself.